Welcome back to Season 1, Episode 32 of Digital Dissection, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties. Today's episode, we're actually going back to where we began this whole thing. We're going to be talking about Ghostbusters again, but this time we're going to be talking about the mythos and some of the background information that's going to be very, very useful for Ghostbusters Afterlife when it premieres, which is going to be later this year. For those of you who are listening, it's still 2021. But either way, we think we'll have enough info for you to listen to and be very well prepared going into this new fall movie.
But before we find out which dickless peck shut off our containment unit, we've got a few housekeeping things we've got to get out of the way because we've kind of forgot to every once in a while. We are Joe, Mark, and Chelsea, three friends who really like to talk about pop culture references, especially the ones that we particularly enjoy, and put them right into your ear holes. And if you happen to got here today on accident, you can try typing in things like Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts to find more of our episodes. And if you don't usually hang out on those podcast websites, you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching at Digital Dissect 1. We also have a pretty keen blog that you could read sometime. So, by all means, join the conversation elsewhere.
Well, it's actually kind of nice to get back to where we started because, you know, Ghostbusters has been a pretty big part of both yours and mine involvement from like our pop culture education, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, one day if we both end up with type 2 diabetes, we can both have a mutual blame an ecto cooler for that.
Oh, you know, I actually have not had it since the 80s. I never bought it again.
Yeah, neither have I. When they did the re-release, or I know in the GB fan community, there were recipes online available to make your own ecto cooler, and I don't think either of us had the cojones to try doing some homemade ecto cooler.
I always love those videos because the guy, whoever is in them, they're always like, "All right, so you're gonna put in 8 to 10 cups of sugar," and I'm like, "Wait,
hold on,
like."
You're going to kill us right away, right from the start of it.
Like, that's 1 cup of water. You can't put that much in there.
No.
Oh, man.
8 to 10 cups of sugar. Oh, my God.
It blows the mind. But either way, yes, it's nice to be back in the saddle. And as our intro points out here, for folks that haven't watched Ghostbusters in a while, because it's one of those movies that everybody seems to remember, you know, the logo is an international phenomena. Everybody knows what that is.
Yeah.
But you meet a lot of people that go, "Oh yeah, I love Ghostbusters, but I haven't watched it in like 15 years. You know, I haven't watched Ghostbusters 2 in even longer."
Yeah.
And you and I have run into plenty of people who are even, you know, big fans that haven't played the video game either.
I know, which is really sad on their part. Well, for them, not like, you know, they need to try harder to be a nerd or anything, but like they're missing out. That is such a great story to that video game because one, it's written by Harold Ramis and
Dan Aykroyd.
Dan Aykroyd. Yeah, the same people who wrote the original 2 movies. So it's them carrying on the story. And it is also, unfortunately, the last time we ever get Harold Ramis reprising Egon Spengler. So that is something where if you haven't played it yet, I mean, it's you can get this on the PS4 or the Xbox, whatever number they're on. I can't keep track of them. I own this on the PlayStation 3, the PS4, and the Switch. I own this on 3 different systems. So, and I've played it on all 3 systems. Platinumed it on 1 because, you know, you can't platinum on the PS3 anymore because the online is shut down. Oh, most wanted ghosts.
That's like, for those of us who are big fans of the PS3 game, we're a little salty because they shut down the servers crazy fast.
It's super fast, Atari. What the hell?
Well, those of you who had the Xbox, since you had your little, you know, Xbox Live subscription, they kept that on for forever. But either way, we'll save the video game for the latter half of this conversation. But for now, what we want to do is, let's catch folks up on the background of Ghostbusters. This isn't necessarily going to be like step for step the plot. What we're going to do here, we're going to tell you about some of the important details that we think will be beneficial going into Ghostbusters Afterlife. So, needless to say, this is your spoiler warning, everyone. We don't do this very often. Most of the time, our spoiler alerts are like tongue-in-cheek as we're saying them.
Yeah, because like we're usually talking about properties that are probably 10 to 15 years old. So, let alone this one. This one is what, pushing 37 years old?
Yeah,
but
to some, Joe, just like how we've talked about before with like NBC's old if I haven't seen it, it's new to me deal. I really do think that the video game is going to be that for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, and that's one thing about the video game too, before going any further, which makes me really excited to talk about this, is because the video game really does expand on the lore that we're going to be talking about, a lot of this world building and mythos that Dan Aykroyd had put into this movie that I think some people don't pick up on, because I know we both talked about how like we've met and talked with people who just like, oh, Ghostbusters, it's great comedy. And it's like, oh, it's more than a comedy. It's a it's got action. It's got like it's actually a very like great science fiction movie. And like, no, it's just funny. It's like, well, yeah, it's funny, but like, I think sometimes like a lot of this world building is just lost on some of the audience members because they are having kind of like too much fun watching the movie, which, I mean, it's art, it's subjective. You get what you get out of it. So, but especially in case if you are someone who just views this as a comedy, hopefully maybe like we'll go over a few things that you kind of just associated to like, oh, this is general plot and it just moves the story forward. And I don't know, maybe you'll take a closer glance next time you watch the movie. Yeah.
And if you look at episode 1 of this program, or program. As I usually always say,
program with the robots.
Episode 1 of this show does go into this a little bit, but just like how we like to do with our quote unquote Globetrotter episodes, the story of Ghostbusters does begin in ancient Sumeria.
Yeah,
the place of the Mesopotamians, as we've liked to say, Joe, that Fertile Crescent area of the world, modern day Iraq,
where civilization began.
Yes. And honestly, the older I got and the more history that I consumed, the more I realized that Ghostbusters did pick an interesting time in human history to focus on. The Sumerians and the Mesopotamians, like we said, they were real people. I don't know, were the Hittites real people? I know that they mentioned them too. They're like,
they mentioned the Hittites. I think I want to say I've heard of Hittites before, and the only reason I've heard of them before is I'm pretty sure it was in a Dead Sea song.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And so if they're saying it, I don't think it's just a reference to the to Ghostbusters.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure the Hittites were real.
Same realm, same area. We're talking like, Iraq, Syria, that same time frame, which I think was, good Lord, at minimum, I think these folks were walking around. What was that like? It was like 1500 BC or something. I mean, it was
4th millennium. So you're looking really far back there.
Yeah, just a little bit further back.
Yeah. Or I take it back. Mesopotamia was 6000 BC.
Oh, okay.
So it's old.
Yeah, much further back. Which
it's definitely vintage, if you will.
Yeah. Whatever gaming consoles they were on, folks, officially considered retro now. Hittites.
Yes.
But that was really fun, mostly because a lot of us, when you start taking history courses, you start getting into hearing about the Sumerians and the Mesopotamians, because that's usually where a lot of these history books will start. Like we're looking for the earliest like organized human societies that we've got documentation on, and there's still a lot of mystery though to these people, which is why I think it was such a great choice to put this story into that era. We've talked about in episode 1 how there's the ziggurat, right, the temple of the Mesopotamians that shows up in there. So it was cool to see some of those little details pop up. But that's like the earliest Ghostbusters history that we have. That's where anyone who's ever seen, Zuul before, Gozer,
Hmm.
any of these folks, they were all supposedly built into the religions of these folks back then.
Yeah, and they go quite a bit into it as far as like why Gozer is stuck in this subdimension and can only escape every once in a while because there was a war between basically the Gozerians in the fourth millennium versus like the main Sumerians at that time who worshipped Tiamat, which I'm probably pronouncing that deity wrong, but basically there's a war between the two of them. Tiamat, being the more powerful deity, wins and banishes Gozer to Gozer's own little world, and can only come out in this destructor form for brief periods of time, which always made me wonder too. Like when it came time for like Gozer to come out as the destructor, like one thing that I guess I don't know about, or maybe I haven't read into very much, is how long is Gozer actually able to be out for before it gets sucked back in to its little subworld? Because like it comes out as a Slore, a Tor, a Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man, and we're assuming that there were not four heroes gallivanting along with unlicensed untested nuclear accelerators back in the early history days to lock the Slore and lock the Tor away. And they also killed thousands of people, or like Gozer killed thousands in that form. So what stopped Gozer, and what made Gozer go back to its dimension?
Well,
that's a question I always had, but yeah.
Not to get too far ahead of it, but it does kind of lead into the unseen antagonist of Ghostbusters, who's Ivo Shandor, who you hear a little bit about in Ghostbusters 1. To answer the question a little bit, though, honestly, Joe, the explanation is almost similar to Ready Player One, and like holding the power glove and having 3 minutes of of use. But yeah, so when you start to think about why Gozer can't keep this destructor form, right? You hear destructor a lot in Ghostbusters. That's because Gozer is not a he or she, by the way.
That's why I'm saying it.
Yeah.
It's whatever it wants to be.
Yes, whatever it wants to be. It needs a lot of energy to be able to come through to our dimension, right? So in Ghostbusters 1, the whole idea of being able to open the gate between the Earth and the ghost realm, we'll call it just for simplicity's sake, requires a ton of energy, right? So without the energy, you don't have the destructor form, can't come through, right? That's effectively what seals Gozer in. Now, as far as the laws of what Gozer can do or how long it can maintain, it's probably got to eat a lot of calories. I'm guessing a lot of carbs.
I'm guessing. Yeah. I mean, I once had my students calculate how many tacos Spider-Man would need to lift a truck, which, by the way, that's like 4 million tacos. Not even kidding. It is a lot. He doesn't have the stomach room to be able to do that. So we're talking about something like, a giant Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man. He's like, what, 300 feet tall? Something huge?
Yeah. I mean, it's the size of a high rise,
Yeah, huge. Like, I don't know how you're bringing that through an extra dimensional gate without you're looking at billions of tacos to make that happen.
well, before we get too far away from it, for Gozer to get locked away, because it, like you said, Gozer was banished from this realm and essentially wanders planes of existence. And so this quote unquote destructor nickname, Gozer wouldn't actually get until later on when exploring other worlds. And so Gozer got the reputation because he would just, mindlessly kill everything in his path. And he would take different forms in order to do so.
Yeah, and just to rub it in your face, he let you choose what he was going to come at, which, by the way, thank God, whatever you believe in, they never picked like some schmuck wasn't thinking of a plague or something. Just something like slow death, suffering.
Yeah. I choose the form of a guy wearing skinny jeans, plaid, and drinking an IPA.
It's just a giant hipster. He just annoys you to death.
Oh my God, yeah, that'd be the most painful way to go, I would think. But ultimately, that's where Gozer gets the nickname from. The destructor,
Mm-hmm.
seriously, just killing the shit out of things. And for those of you that haven't quite put this together yet, because it still boggles some people, Gozer being able to enter planes of existence is dependent upon Vince Clortho.
Mm-hmm. Not
Joe,
Vince. Vince.
Vince
Vince
Clortho.
Clortho, yeah. I
Yeah.
thought it was Vince for the longest time. Like, that's a really modern name. This guy came in late in the game to really want to be a Gozer dude. But yeah, no, Vince. Definitely V-I-N-Z.
Yeah, Vince Clortho and Zuul,
Mm-hmm.
Keymaster and Gatekeeper. And for those of you that just need this absolutely played out for you, keys go into keyholes.
Yes.
So
Vince
very specific.
Clortho, the Keymaster, and Zuul, the Gatekeeper. In case you need it spelled out, which also, by the way, demigods, like, I think that almost doesn't get explained too well enough, because like I always just understood those two as like just worshippers, but they're actually fairly powerful beings themselves.
Yes, absolutely. When it came to the history here in Ghostbusters, yeah, Vince Clortho, Zuul, Gozer, they're all treated as gods or demigods. So actually, Gozer is a class 7 entity, which is like reserved for demons and gods, essentially. And I'm pretty sure Vince Clortho and Zuul are also in that same class somewhere.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, in terms of how the Ghostbusters, I said class 7, like everybody's gonna fucking know what that is. They do have their classifications of ghosts and how powerful things are. So, you know, kind of like the chart at the doctor's office, you know.
Yep, it's they are definitely like the frowny face. It's a very squiggly lines and is turning a little red. Like there's beet red, like 2 more faces down. That's not them.
Yes. Yeah, they're
That's
not
too
people.
far.
They're not people you want to mess with. It's not like when you meet a dog for the first time, you put your hand out. Like, don't do that.
No,
just don't do that. Go back into the corner.
This is like if you see a cat and you know that there's some cats, you go like, pss, 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 you bring them over. This is the cat. You're like, no, get that thing out of here. Not that cat. You go away. Get it out of here, Ma. Yeah. Ma, there's a weird cat in the yard.
Get the hell out of here. Yeah, and obviously with Ghostbusters having comedic undertones, you know, with Rick Moranis and everything, you do feel like you get a little bit of the severity lost in this lore they've built out with how Gozer literally gets summoned to places just like Galactus and wipes the shit out of things. So Vince Clortho and Zuul are like the Silver Surfer, right? And they come,
couple
they bring
heralds there.
Yeah. Dude, they're just destroying people, and they're doing it in very disgusting ways, right?
Yep.
So I thought that was a really cool thing within Ghostbusters that, you know, it sounds cool. It sounds like just throwaway dialogue like we've talked about. But no, it's actually mythos. It's actually, there are some real things about it that weave in and out of it. You know, it's kind of cool. It's really,
and Ivan would argue that, like, even though, like, I think we both may have mistakenly said throwaway dialogue, or like it's something you can usually sweep under the rug for the sake of the movie. But I mean, at the same time, like, all of it makes sense as the movie goes along if you're paying attention to it. Like, there is a build with each little bit you layer away of the myth of Gozer or the story of Gozer. There is a very nice, like, well thought of, like, build to it. So this is something where, when you're hearing about, you know, during the rectification of the Voldroni, before you've gotten to that, you have, like, heard, like, things like other whispers of Gozer, and how, like, you start with, like, there are a few names, like, we've heard of Gozer, there's some worshippers, he's like but Gozer is a deity, and that's all we kind of know. So, you know, it's like, okay, there's some sort of weird god involved. And then as you start meeting other characters in the movie and you start hearing more about Gozer, like, you get this, like, added, like, okay, this isn't just some, like, you know, backyard, like, I was gonna say back alley deity. It's like, no, this is actually something serious. And when you start even hearing of these, like, these terms or these events, like, even though they sound nonsensical, like they're just clearly making, like, this up for the story, like there's weight to them because of how they've introduced them and how they've talked about previous things. So unlike the fourth cataclysm, by the time you hear the rectification of the Veldroni, you're assuming this is something that actually means something bad.
Yeah, and specifically what it refers to, just to, I mean, if we got to whittle it down, what it refers to are races of people that Gozer goes and destroys and just absolutely wipes off the face of the planet.
Yep.
Now, one thing I do want to talk about before we walk away from Vince Clortho and Zuul. Joe, do you know that Zuul is actually a real thing?
Yeah, it's an Egyptian thing.
Not just Egyptian.
Really?
I'm talking something that you actually would love quite a bit. Zuul was actually a dinosaur.
No way.
Yes. Yeah,
I had no idea.
Zuul is part of the Ankylosaur family.
No, wow. That's fantastic. Which I'm guessing, I wonder, so was that made, was Zuul a part of the Ankylosaur family because someone who liked Ghostbusters discovered the dinosaur and named it? Or was it like the other way around?
So some things, myth becomes legend, legend becomes whatever. Same kind of idea here. I'm not sure what influences what, but the idea of the Ankylosaur being an influence for what the terror dogs looked like, some people look at it and go, I see similarities. It makes sense to me. I think it makes sense to me too, but whatever. I think it's one of those bits of trivia that we just didn't have time for in episode 1 when we were like, freaking out about recording the episode.
Yep.
so this was one of those things that I always had written down. I'm like, Joe, you love dinosaurs. We got to talk about the real influence here. So yeah, for those of you watching at home that want to go look up Zuul, we'll give you some time, or we'll just keep talking. But go ahead and look it up. Yeah. It's out there.
Absolutely.
So, all right, so let's move on from Gozer for a moment because we'll have plenty to talk about there. But yes, the main baddie of Ghostbusters 1, who's never seen. Okay, I mean it's hilarious how Ivo Shandor is a massive bad guy in Ghostbusters, and you never see him.
Never, not once. Just they talk about him and how he was just ahead of his time and makes buildings like they don't anymore. No one builds them like they used to. No, that's the common term, right? They don't build them like they used to, or maybe no one ever made them like Ivo Shandor.
Yeah, let's talk about the man himself, Ivo Shandor. So we don't know about his early childhood.
No.
Nor do we know about his formative years. But what we do know is that he was a physician/doctor, and Egon specifically refers to him performing a lot of unnecessary surgeries as part of his questionable practice. We would come to find out later, because this isn't something you're going to see in the movies. The unnecessary surgeries, he actually added a second heart to someone in an effort to make them more efficient. And he also apparently tried to create a centaur, human-horse hybrid.
And here I thought that maybe he was just a Star Trek fan, the first surgery. And he's just like, you know what? We'll give this guy 2 hearts, then it's going to be 4 lungs, and then straight on to the Klingon double dick. But he didn't get there. He went to the centaur next.
The quote-unquote questionable, that we don't really know if we can confirm, organs of the race of people in Star Trek. But yeah, they've really built up this interesting background for the guy that you never actually see in the movies. And part of his background that I think is so compelling is because he kind of plays into that idea of some of these unfortunate human experimentations that happened in the early 1900s / World War II era, right?
Yeah, and honestly, like I actually kind of respect the movie. They didn't do the cop out and just say he was like a Nazi scientist. Because I feel like that was the Nazis are the easy villains in basically any American movie.
Oh God, yes, especially the 80s.
Oh, definitely the 80s. Or even like my favorite video game series, like the Nazis show up in almost every Uncharted game, except not 4. 4 is all pirates, but they're in the other 3. They show up. So yeah, it was refreshing. Like, it's not just a Nazi scientist. This is just a crazy asshole doctor all on his own.
Well, he is crazy for at least in the way that I look at him. but he does revive the Cult of Gozer,
Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, they were very prominent, like we mentioned, back in Mesopotamia, Sumerian times, and
Mm-hmm.
had been dormant for a very long time.
Yep.
Now, when you say Nazis, we can't confirm this because it's not in the margins anywhere, but the Cult of Gozer, he grew to almost 1,000 people, I believe, based on what we know from all of the Ghostbusters lore we've gotten over the last, almost 4 decades.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's like 1,000 people. Maybe there's Nazi in there. We don't know. We're not going to speculate there. But yeah, he grows this homegrown operation, and they start doing all of these quote unquote unnecessary architectural changes to buildings.
Mm-hmm.
He literally builds Dana's Central Park West building.
Yep. Art Deco masterpiece.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
While we're
Yeah.
building this interdimensional beacon, we're gonna make it look fancy.
Yeah, and by fancy, you've got very, very architectural I was gonna say highlights, but architectural art forms such as cold riveted girders with cores of pure selenium, magnesium tungsten alloys, and gold plated bolts.
Yeah.
Who builds shit like that? Which, by the way, I guess credit to like the New York construction workers aren't like, you don't fucking need this for this shit. Just fucking take it. We'll put the other stuff in there. Hey, you guys, you got the regular iron shit? Just use that. We're taking the gold stuff home. Yeah. He doesn't have to know that. He'll never know.
Yeah. Maybe that's why Gozer had such a hard time getting here. It was the gold-plated bolts that just
all
didn't
gone.
Quite make it.
None of it was there.
That was the key to it all. Well, what I always thought was cool about the selenium aspect of this is that selenium is a compound that naturally occurs, and humans all have selenium within them. We just do. It's in there, and I always found that cool because as I grew older, I thought, isn't this interesting how selenium could be the Ghostbusters connection to the ghost realm and human existence, right? I thought that was kind of cool because otherwise, it just sounds ridiculous. Like, why the hell would you do that? So
well, I mean, as you know, like it sounds like it's very almost like alchemic with what's going on here, which would, I mean, alchemy by Shandor's time is definitely, gone, but it's definitely looking at like, these are the materials that were within humans. And maybe that was part of like, when humans get sacrificed, that was that particular like element that was needed. It's not just like, oh, blood itself is sacred and it's life-giving, but it's like, no, maybe it's the selenium in the blood that actually Gozer feeds off of or needs. And so you're lining your building with it. You just think, we don't need human sacrifices. We can just slap selenium in the building and boom, we got a Gozer tower.
And we can at least make those connections, right? I mean, that's what is so cool about this is that it does once again make the idea seem kind of real in what they're doing here. So it was funny to kind of hear this conversation when they're in the prison in the later part of the movie, because you can kind of place yourself in the 1920s when Shandor is doing all these things. Like, people are questioning what he's doing, but they don't have the knowledge and the suspicious nature that we kind of have now, right? Yeah. So this guy's just going all over New York and he's building these weird things, and people just kind of go up and they're like, you know what, that looks different there. But I got weird. I got pants up my armpits here. I'm not going to worry about it too much, but that's interesting. You got going up there. Yeah, I mean, so once again, we're getting that realm of believability, right? But as you paint the picture of Ivo Shandor, those are the things that they talk about in the first movie that if you're not paying close attention, it's like, okay, whatever. But it actually, there's actually a lot there. Yeah, because we don't even hear about Shandor until they're in jail, right? That's the first time we hear about him is when they're going over the blueprints for Dana Barrett's apartment. Because and again, like, that's also like a great layering is that we start with Gozer because we start with Zuul because that's the first thing Dana hears the terror dog say Zuul. So that's their breadcrumb, and they build and build and build, and then finally when the movie is coming to like
a buckling point where things are really about to go down, they get this last part where like, here's this somewhat modern link to all the things that have been going on. This is our missing piece to kind of figure out what we're dealing with here. And then, yeah, like it's just, again, it's great scripting, it's great pacing, it's good writing, and that's part of like, again, why we love this movie so much. So Shandor comes in literally the 11th hour. We hear about him in the movie, and that's the last we hear about him on film.
Yeah, Shandor passes away long before the Ghostbusters ever exist.
Yep.
So just basically to we'll just summate this as quickly as we can. So yeah, Gozer was doing some pretty bad things thousands of years ago. His worshippers died off because Gozer turned on his own worshippers and killed them all. And so
not good job security at all. No. I mean, how are you going to keep coming back if you keep killing your dudes? What are you thinking?
But it's reminiscent of Old Testament, even Peter jokes about that, right? And it would make sense, by the way, for a parapsychologist, because that is an actual degree, parapsychology, and it analyzes these same things, oddly enough. So for those of you that like look at Bill Murray playing Pete Venkman and go, he's just kind of flying by the seat of his pants. Yes, in a lot of ways, but his actual degree applies to everything going on in this movie. So
although we do question the sedatives he carries on him for dates. That's odd. Very weird.
The Thorazine stuff is we've mentioned this in conversation over the past 10 years, like going,
what is he doing carrying that much Thorazine with him?
Lethal amounts
of Thorazine. Yeah.
But hey, Pete Venkman, we'll cover that maybe in a later time.
Day.
So but long story short, Gozer wipes out his worshippers. The cult dies off. Shandor comes back,
decides humanity is too sick to survive, and then how can we get rid of it? Gozer.
He revives the cult. He builds the bridge to the other plane.
Nearly 1,000 followers, I think, was the height of his Gozer worshippers. But we'll come back to Gozer in a little bit, because when we talk about video game stuff, is the next time we hear of Ivo Shandor. So we get to Ghostbusters 1. As you know from the movie, Gozer comes back. He is a 50-foot, 100-foot marshmallow man, I think is the term. They turn him into, what am I thinking of? Like the canned puff, marshmallow fluff. They turn him into marshmallow fluff, which is shaving cream, by the way. That's what you get all over the Ecto-1 and all over the Ghostbusters when they're done with the movie. They turn Gozer into shaving cream. Everything seems fine. The movie's over. We roll the credits. Millions are made. They were afraid at first because was it Ivan Reitman that actually walked out of the movie because he was afraid that it was going to tank?
Oh yeah, afraid it was going to tank. And then it becomes international phenomena. The pressure mounts to try and match that success is what brings us to the doorstep of 1989's Ghostbusters 2.
Yes.
And so what's funny about Ghostbusters 2, and I'm not trying to be overly academic here, but the whole point of Ghostbusters 2 is to analyze the state of the people of New York City, and how this idea that negative energy, negative emotions, negative thoughts can adjust the environment around you. And there are people who have actually done research on negative energy impacting other people, whether it's children, whether it's relationships. So it was oddly topical, even now for 1989.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, even now, like people like, I mean, the whole like vibes thing, people like go off of that, like negative vibes, good vibes, all that fun stuff. But it's basically mind over matter, is that you can literally, the way you perceive things, the way you think things, the way you feel things can affect your physical state of being. And this movie is taking that idea and really running with it.
Really showing you what can happen when you put that many miserable assholes in one place, as Pete Venkman mentions it. And so we'll cut right to the chase. I mean, there's a little game of cat and mouse as this mystery unfolds as to what's happening in New York, because there's some weird shit happening. And as any sequel tends to be, right? Like the Ghostbusters are down their luck. Nobody believes even that Gozer showed up, even though it's only 5 years later.
Yep.
Whatever. But what do we get
Mhm.
introduced to? But would be our favorite Moldavian tyrant, Vigo the
Vigo the
Carpathian.
Carpathian.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oddly
I
enough,
mean,
dude. Yeah, that guy's he's kind of got the same mentality as a Gozer. Just
oh, definitely. The sorrow of
yeah.
Moldova. This man is not the one to pick up a saxophone and go to town.
No.
Not this guy.
No.
He will throw that saxophone down and end Eurovision in a second.
Oh, God. I mean, the stories that they kind of build for him, so they do feel very similar in terms of how you're making something believable, right?
Yep.
Like this was a guy who was murderous. He so Vigo the Carpathian was also viewed as like a magician or a wizard in a lot of ways. So they talk about that in the movie a little bit. They build on that in some of the ongoing like books and the comics afterward. Like he goes from magician to wizard, and so there's a little bit more going on there than just some militant guy who's killing thousands of people. But crazy evil though.
Oh, very. I mean, you've got Vigo the Cruel, Vigo the Torturer, Vigo the Despised, and Vigo the Unholy. We're all the ones that are on the books. And then, of course, Vigo the Butch.
Yes, as Venkman.
Suffering from Carpathian kitten loss syndrome. Which is why he probably got all those nicknames. Like, how could you be happy if you don't have a kitten like that? Like that drive anyone to madness, you lose your kitten that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's once again, it's interesting how this is kind of sandwiched into a comedy, quote unquote, right? Because the way this guy existed, like you said, he's a tyrant. He's killing people. He's enslaving people. He's taking over these countries in, like what you want to call it, Eastern Europe. Fictional transition Russia, right? So that's where he's doing business. And so it's kind of similar to Gozer.
Yeah.
The people that, are under his thumb do kind of rebel at some point.
Yep.
And so the fight that happens here ends up, Vigo ends up being poisoned, shot, stabbed, hung, stretched, disemboweled, and drawn and quartered. And then just before his head died, he says, "Death is but a door, time is but a window, and I'll be back."
And all the way, this was done at the ripe old age or young age of 105 is how old Vigo was when this happened. Which, again, like, this is good world building. This is good storytelling because in this, like, one line, you have really, like, shown that, okay, he was a powerful wizard. He had, like, clearly, you had to have some magical control or something that lets you, one, I'm not going to say live that long because certainly there are people now that have been on the planet for 105 years, but like to be 105 years and have all of those things happen to you and your head manages to survive.
Yeah.
So clearly, I mean, to me, that implies he was even decapitated.
He was.
And
he was. He's beheaded. I mean,
he's beheaded. Yeah, that's right there. So he's beheaded and the head's still like talking away. And it's like, okay, yeah, this guy, like, he fucks. He does.
I mean, I actually years later, when you think about dark energy and how it impacts the Ancient One in the Marvel universe and Doctor Strange, I made that same parallel to Vigo, altering energy to keep himself alive, because in death, his essence transfers to his painting that he had commissioned of himself.
Yes, in a very un-Harry Potter-like way. Like, this is a bad painting haunting, not like a sleepy Dumbledore. Not like that at all.
just Vigo in there at night, and he's like, "Put that light out." That's all he's there for.
Yep. He'd be like, "There's a troll." And I put it there, you bitches.
I've made the glass shatter with the sound of my voice. Yeah, Vigo is a bad dude, though. And I think that's it, if you want to call it sequel syndrome. Maybe they lost a little bit of that severity because of the path they chose with the movie, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
No.
what we're here to talk about is that you've got a really bad dude,
Hmm.
and as we begin to explore this negative energy, we find out that there's just tunnels of slime underneath the streets of New York
Yep.
that allow him to come back.
Yeah.
Um, but
Hmm.
the slime is also interesting in the fact that it has some limitations and it has some rules, just like Gozer has rules. Gozer has tremendous amounts of energy that are required to summon him into this world.
Hmm.
Like when they capture all those ghosts in the containment unit and it busts open, that's the kick that allows that to happen. In Ghostbusters 2, the slime that's running under the streets, which we will get to in a moment,
Hmm.
because it's kind of unexplained how it gets there, but don't worry, we're building.
We're getting there. Give us time.
The slime operates though on a similar type of of rules where yeah, like it allows ghosts to come back and manifest and
Hmm.
begin to do things, but it can't restore physical forms.
Mm-mm.
So I thought that was cool because it does kind of mirror that of the Gozer, coming into this world thing.
Yeah.
And so if you're not a fan of Ghostbusters 2, at least look at the rules and go,
You
they
know
did
what?
put some thought into this.
They did. And it was also kind of nice that like, yeah, you are have that you have a very similar build of like you have this very powerful thing trying to come back by the end of the movie. But I mean, you need to have something like that. You can certainly do something where like the big bad is there the whole time, but usually when that happens, like when you've got a movie that does that, like the monster's already there, they do the thing where like you don't even see the monster fully until halfway through the movie or maybe until the end of the movie. So even then, it's the same like cinematic concept of the evil's there, it's doing something. You don't see the full evil until we're almost done. So it's the same type of smoke and mirror thing, but it is nice that they didn't do the same thing. Like they didn't just do another god. They didn't just do another deity with all these minions or anything. This is just like I don't know, the self-made monster. I guess is the way to put Vigo. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he is almost by as it kind of ends up turning out by chance because of the slime. He's able to almost come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I think what it does, interestingly enough, here is we're trying to give people some background into into the new movie here. Um, what I think it does well enough is that it proves that in the Ghostbusters universe, you can create, these characters
Yeah.
that might feel almost like a serial in a Pulp Fiction,
Hmm.
right? Like the ability to bring in these characters can be done. I mean, for all the faults of Ghostbusters 2, Vigo remains to be a pretty solid villain.
Yeah.
And his abilities and what he's capable of, I mean, if Ghostbusters 2 was any grittier, would be terrifying,
It
I
would.
think.
It would. And I don't know. Still, I think Ghostbusters 2 gets way too much flack. I will say that every time we talk about it. It's a great movie. And honestly, if you're looking at it as a, like again, like if you're like, oh, these movies are only comedies, I almost think that Ghostbusters 2 has a lot better comedy than Ghostbusters 1
Yeah.
in some respects. Like like I don't know. They take Egon's like weird science like eccentricity to like another level. Like you definitely have that in the first episode in the first movie the remember that time you tried to drill a hole in your head and he's like that would have worked if you wouldn't have stopped me. Like
Yeah.
that's pure like he's thinking at a different level as a scientist thing. And then you have this movie where he gets a kiss from Dana Barrett on the cheek and he like
Yeah. Oh
there's a
yeah.
physical shudder there. And then you find out like the psychology stuff he's doing. Like he's basically torturing this couple that
Oh
is
God,
that
yes.
thinks they're going in for marriage counseling. And it turns out he's just raising the heat and telling them that they have to wait like another hour or so every like I don't know however long they tell that. They just keep delaying it. So he's torturing those people because they're not also he says they think they're getting counseling. So he has no
Yes.
intention of like we will actually get them a counselor at the end of this. Like those people are going to go home very angry.
and then moments after he's told that he's like a great guy by Dana, then he
Mhm.
immediately says, "Let's take away the puppy from a kid." And it's like
Oh God, yeah.
so the humor is
Mhm.
there, But the long story short of it is that if you're trying to get caught up on Ghostbusters 2 and you don't either have access to it, really what you can focus on here, if you've never seen it, I guess, is that there is a force that's putting slime underneath the city of New York. Obviously, the Ghostbusters figure out a way to reverse this negative energy and to rise to the occasion. And so it's cool because we get Vigo out of it. You know, we get this case in the Ghostbusters universe that emotions can do very powerful things in the universe, and so it's a really good setup for the video game.
Yes.
Which takes place 2 years later in 1991. And what's really fun about it is that the joking line of the franchise rights alone will make us, rich beyond our wildest dreams is kind of becoming true. As the Ghostbusters are negotiating contracts with the city of New York.
Yep.
They have a very steady inflow of business, and so it's very good times for them as opposed to the beginning of Ghostbusters 2. So much so that we're introduced to the rookie, who is just named the Rookie.
Yep, that's all he gets. He bears an uncanny resemblance to our friend Steve Meyer.
Yes, he does. And just like any good boy band, you need a fifth member. So here we go. So the video game we want to be kind of careful with here, but at the same time, we gave you a spoiler warning because there's some very important things going on. And as we mentioned with our buddy Ivo Shandor, the video game does a very good job of showing how the Cult of Gozer wasn't just 1,000 people. I should say living people.
Living people, yeah. Because it turns out they do take members from beyond.
They do. They do. And so what's interesting about this is that the Cult of Gozer, or the Gozer worshippers, whatever you want to call them, they end up doing almost like an Illuminati type of thing, right? Like they go back and talking about the life of Shandor, because in Ghostbusters 1, we don't really get the life of Shandor. We just hear about here's the cliff notes.
Yep.
Well, they absolutely build on this to where we find out that the Cult of Gozer is alive and well, quote unquote.
Well, yes. Alive? Meh.
Yeah. Well, just like any madman, Ivo Shandor put some things in place, should he meet his demise. Because in Ghostbusters 1, the gate opens, right? The gate to the ghost plane opens, but it's not because of some organized reason. It happens because of issues with Walter Peck. It happens because this massive amount of energy that was being stored gets blown open. And so it's kind of just a nice coincidence for Gozer, right? To get into the planet.
Or was it fate? Vince Clortho was there and he knew it was going to happen, Mark.
I don't know. Could be fate, could be karma. Yeah. We'll never know. But in the video game, we find out that there was much more planning involved, and that the unnecessary architectural changes around the city, they all had a purpose, Joe. And do you want to regale us with that story?
So it would turn out that when Shandor was just, buying up property left and right and springing up his Gozer towers, it wasn't random. No. Because the Shandors and their very, very large wealth that they had, because it turns out they had their own island in New York. So they had an island with a castle, which, castle, mansion, whatever you want to call it, a lot of money. So they were able to throw some things around here. And they were really, really pulling for Gozer, because they had basically set up more or less a network dedicated to bringing Gozer back throughout New York. All of these points on the where the buildings were, they formed. I'm trying to remember the exact term. It's not a pentagram. They're not doing not doing a different thing. What was it again?
There's a mandala.
Mandala. That's the thing. They formed a mandala, and that mandala's job was to bring back Gozer or bring back a massive deity. And to power the mandala, they started their network at Shandor Island, where they were able to basically bring the slime from another dimension and get it under New York City. And it was presumably there during Ghostbusters 1. It just no one knew that it was there. It wasn't doing anything at the time. And it just eventually builds up enough charge for Ghostbusters 2 over, people assume step on your neck is say hello.
Step on your faces, look at you.
Yeah. And then it finally can bring back Vigo. So Vigo was benefiting from the work of Ivo Shandor.
Yes, the entire time.
The
entire time, which is what makes the video game so brilliant, because slime is, ectoplasm is a real thing. Okay, first off, it may not have psychokinetic properties or do what what it does in Ghostbusters, but it's a real thing.
Yeah.
But this idea of slime and how they used it, whether it's the Shandors or whether it's Ghostbusters in general, slime ends up being almost let's just call it the abridged version of accessing other dimensions.
Yeah.
Right. And
it's a medium.
It is
basically.
Yeah, and playing off of the rules of Ghostbusters 2, if it's negatively charged enough, that thing can open up a gate to the ghost plane.
Yeah.
So what the video game does a really good job of is proving that the Shandors weren't just a family of one guy who is a crazy doctor, scientist.
No, not just one man alone, betrayed by the cult he loves.
which for those of you who are, let's just say, at home and you're literally like Drax and you're taking everything we say literally, Joe does not actually mean that. The Cult of Gozer never turned on Ivo. But Ivo definitely made some pretty strong connections across the city of New York.
Yeah, very affluent people, which, you may need if you're trying to build an underground network of slime towers to bring back an old deity.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's so cool about, well, I say cool, but I don't mean cool in actually being an evil asshole, but I mean, it was cool in how they built this out. Under the city of New York, he enlisted, I think it's National Steel, the CEO of National Steel, became one of the worshipers of Gozer. And so, Ivo was making promises to these major business people in New York, and they're helping him build the infrastructure for the mandala that we talked about. If you've never seen a mandala before, really, it's like a series of concentric circles that overlap with each other. And so I think the easiest way for people to visualize this is if you're watching the Game of Thrones intro and you see all of the houses crossing over each other and lining up in the circles.
Mandala-like.
That's the same type of idea. At some point, they all align just like the planets do. And that's how they basically come up with this idea of when you focus the rings, the energy passes through, boom, the portal's opened. So I always thought that was awesome, because the idea behind explaining the slime and how the slime has a part in summoning the ghosts. The ghosts are the energy source that powers the conduit, and then the conduit hits the nodes open the portal. I mean, holy shit, guys. This is a comedy. Quote unquote.
It's a comedy. Yep.
So what I thought was really great about the video game in this sense is that it validates Ghostbusters 2, first of all.
Oh, completely. It is. I can definitely see again, the complaint that the slime was just conveniently there at the time of the movie. Because it seems this is it's not as bad as the Ecto 1 being a rolling nuclear bomb at the last second, but it's a convenient plot point. Whereas now it turns out it was actually a very well fleshed out idea, as opposed to just it was a quick throwaway thing.
Yeah, well, and who knows what it would have played into if our original vision of Ghostbusters 3 actually happened, because they took the treatment that Dan Aykroyd had for 3, where they go to an alternate version of, Manhattan called Manhattan. This stuff is all out there if you guys ever want to see it. There's a lot of ideas that got pulled out of this that they recycled for the video game.
Mm-hmm.
But the video game was awesome in establishing that there are ways to pass into the ghost plane that don't require the massive amounts of energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you need to know how to get there, and there are certain sacrifices that have to be made. Or I don't know if you want to call it I don't know, it's artifacts. I think
artifacts, yeah.
Yeah, it's based around artifacts,
Mm-hmm.
which was really cool that the Ghostbusters universe would have cursed artifacts that could help you travel between planes.
Yep.
But so it establishes that, and it shows us that there were multiple different ways to enter, the ghost realm, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Which, it's a nice little bow.
Yeah.
on the cinematic universe that we thought at that point.
Very. Which I think going off of that, where you have the video game ending focusing on Shandor, and now moving into the modern era, we have Ghostbusters Afterlife coming up. And I guess, we can't really say spoiler alert because we haven't seen the movie. So what we're going into now is going to be some speculation stuff as to what, could be going on in the movie based off of what we've seen from the 1 or 2 trailers that are out for it so far. I think we have 2.
There are 2 trailers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we can definitely do some speculation here. But what I think is important is to get back to the idea of what we're doing here is helping people understand things that are contextual from what we have.
Yeah.
And then heading into what we don't know about yet, or at least what we chosen few don't know about yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We don't.
And
we do not have, access to the movie ahead of time. We're not the chosen group of people who've seen it already.
One day, perhaps.
One day. When we actually have sponsors for the podcast, when we can stop saying Columbia TriStar Pictures, not a sponsor of the Digital Dissection podcast, and they just give us stuff, that'd be great. But anyway, things that we have seen in the previews that do point us in the direction to where knowing the mythos behind the previous 2 movies and video game could be important is that we do have terror dogs in the preview. So we've got them coming back. And of course you've got these goofy little Stay Puft Marshmallow Men showing up in the supermarket with Paul Rudd. So which you're going to be assuming are basically tiny precursor forms of Gozer coming back into the world.
It is hard to know.
Yeah.
It is hard to know. But one thing I did want to talk about as far as bridging the gap from the video game to Afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the video game, Shandor basically says that I've seen enough of Gozer. He does a full-on Thanos and says, I'm going to do things my way now because, he shows you Gozer's head at the end of it and goes, yeah, Gozer's just, Bush League. He's not doing it for me anymore.
Full-on, we've tried Gozer twice now. Hasn't come through on the promises. Screw this, I'm doing it myself.
Yeah.
That's the Shandor attitude.
Yep. He sure does. And so coming into this movie, it's hard to know how much of the video game they're actually going to use.
Which I hope they do. I haven't heard if the video game will be having any context or brought up in this this capacity, but I hope it is, because they had great game, great story.
Well, it's hard to know what they're going to use. But what we have seen in the trailer, finally getting to that, there are some breadcrumbs that are in the trailer that show us that the Cult of Gozer, once again, is not just contained within one person. The organization is much bigger than just New York. And so that's what brings us to this rural town. Is it in Oklahoma or is it in Alabama? I'm trying to remember where it's supposed to be.
You know what? Oddly, I don't know why, but I thought it was somewhere even further out west.
Oh,
but it's definitely maybe it is Midwest. Actually,
yeah.
did they even say it yet? Because all I know is the only thing that I remember is hearing, like, Paul Rudd's character says, "How's a town with no fault lines? How is it shaking?" So then I guess you would assume it probably isn't terribly far out west, because that would probably imply that the closer you get to California, the closer you are to fault lines. So
No,
mhm.
I think it is Oklahoma because, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in Oklahoma. That's where it
Yeah,
takes place.
where the wind goes sweeping down the plain.
Well, I think it's a cool place to set this because, the thought process that I was in was that there's this idea that there are multiple gateways to hell that exist on Earth, right? Uh, I think one of the supposed locations is in like Kansas or something, right?
I mean I think that's according to Supernatural, that's true.
I'm pretty sure it's legit because I lived in Kansas and everyone's like, oh, we should go there on Halloween and get fucked up. And it's like, no, I really don't want to mess with that if it is real.
Yeah.
But this idea of gateways that we've established, right? There's multiple different kinds of gateways in the Ghostbusters universe, whether it's an extravagant one that requires a shitload of energy, or if you have the right tools, you can access it. Or if you've got the properly charged slime, you could potentially open a gateway too. So it makes sense to me that there would be another gateway to access Gozer. And in the trailer to Afterlife, we do actually see an underground temple in Oklahoma that has Gozer's flat top.
Yeah.
Gozer's prominently
Good
featured
little
on it.
zigger out there, yeah.
So yes. So the idea that there's another gateway that was built exists. And my thought process was, if we have the infrastructure to do this in New York, I'm sure they can do it in other places.
Oh yeah. Just need some selenium and some can-do attitude, and you're gonna make you a Gozer gateway.
just find a few guys standing around a Home Depot. Hey, I need 3. Got a temple we're gonna build. Come on, 3.
Yeah, why not? Let's do it.
but that was really kind of striking that the Gozer worshippers, once again, Illuminati style, stonemason style, they have their own insignia. The insignia is prominent in the trailer for the movie. So it adds up. It makes sense. And in this little Oklahoman town, however you want to call it, we find out that Egon travels there after the events of, if you want to call it post GB2, post video game, whichever narrative choice they pick. No matter what happens, Egon makes his way out there.
Buys himself a house.
Yep, he settles down. But it also seems like maybe the women were actually interested in his epididymis because he's got progeny now.
We have no idea who they came from. I'm personally pulling for Janine.
Yeah,
it could be.
You see what happens. That caricature she played in 2 could have been erased, and they finally found each other.
Well, maybe Louis Tully was just a fling.
Maybe. Yeah. It was the 80s, Joe. It was a weird time.
Yeah, it was French bread pizza. Everyone got a little weird.
But in this case, man, speaking of getting weird, so the Gozer worshippers definitely operated in cells. They have to have. And so now we find out this idea that there's multiple different locations where they were trying to summon things. So that's the key, is that it could be another another Gozer summon. You've mentioned the mini marshmallow men. Maybe that was who knows? Maybe that was a failed attempt to bring Gozer through.
Yeah, it was just a premature manifestation.
Yeah.
Every deity does it, right?
Yeah, right. Instead of sending Gozer through time, we force time through Gozer. But yeah, it's so that's what I thought was really cool, though, is that just in this little trailer that we got, the 2 trailers that we have, we definitely see that the breadcrumbs that have been carried over from 2 movies and a video game have to be living in this movie in some capacity. Like the movies, yes, that's a no-brainer. Like, Mark, you're a dumbass. I know that. But the video game definitely feels like it has some roots that are taking hold here. Especially because I also, this is where the speculation part's going to pop in here. We'll timestamp that. But I really do think the Shandor family continues to live on even past the video game. And I'm thinking that will come back here too, because it comes back in the video game.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll come back here in the movie in some capacity too. Now, as far as who that's going to be, my money's on Paul Rudd. That Paul Rudd could be the he goes by a different name. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the name is so ridiculous that to me it means this guy must have been a Shandor and didn't know it, because somebody was ashamed of the name once they found out all this stuff, and then changed their name years later.
Kind of like how someone turned out they were a Palpatine this whole time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, his name is literally Mr. Gruberson in that movie.
He's also a middle school science teacher. We have odd names.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, which I don't know. It could be. I don't know. I think, man, maybe he's attached to it, because I was going that same route too, because you've got a terror dog very interested in him in the trailer, and it's very reminiscent of Louis Tully being chased by a terror dog in the first movie until he eventually gets caught. So we've got like Paul Rudd, booking it out of Walmart as fast as he can. The terror dog comes flying out. So I think he's either Zuul or Vinz in this movie, or meant to be like obviously like he's a vessel for one of the two.
So I'm happy you said vessel, because this is a spoiler that came out from the action figure line, the new Ghostbusters line. So there's a Build-A-Figure within the Ghostbusters toys, right? And that Build-A-Figure is of a standing terror dog on its hind legs.
Yeah.
Like it's I can't remember exactly what name they gave it, but it's not Vinz and it's not Zuul. It is
a third.
Yes.
Player 3 has entered the game.
I can't remember what they called it, but it was something like the administrator or like it, I can't remember, but it's a specific name like that. And so
has it come to validate our parking finally?
Either that or it's gonna make a suggestion about how we should parent our kids. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But that's something that I always was kind of keeping in the back of my mind. The toys were going to have a spoiler at some point, and sure enough, they did.
They always do. Foolish decisions.
If Mr. Gruberson, Paul Rudd, is not a Shandor, then maybe he's the selected person for that third terror dog, which might have a tie to Shandor in some way. So some of this does require us, though, to lean on that Shandor connection, right? And what happens at the end of the video game. But given who wrote that, I would think they would treat it as canon. I think most people do. So that's where it takes us. Yeah.
And off topic, all the toy companies out there with the Build-A-Figures, could we pump the brakes a little bit on those? As a collector, they're very annoying, especially, and at least if you do it, make it worth the while. Like as long as like the Build-A-Figure is like a massive figure, forgivable. I am still very upset with the Marvel Legends line, who did a Build-A-Figure of Bro Thor in his pajamas, who is just as big as every other figure in that line. Like, why do I have to buy 7 figures to get 1 free figure? Just sell me Bro Thor, because honestly, he's all I wanted in the first place. And now I have to get it from some guy on eBay who wants like $80 for Bro Thor because he had to buy 7 figures to build him. Oh, stop it. Just enough with it. Just sell the damn figure.
At least in this case, I think it was only like, what is it, 5 or 6 figures you have to purchase. So, I mean, not quite the 7, but it's still kind of rough. I mean, yeah.
Speaking of the toy line so far, I am very curious where they're going with that, because currently they have made, at least from what I've seen, you've got the original 3 Ghostbusters, who are now old, because, they're all old in real life. That's where they are. You've got the new Ghostbusters, who are the kids, Trevor, Podcast, and I'm forgetting the third one.
This is Egon's granddaughter.
No, that's the thing. It's not Egon's granddaughter. It's another kid in the movie. But Egon's granddaughter is where I'm curious.
Yes,
because
that's right.
She's missing from the toy line.
That's true.
currently. She's not anywhere, and that blows my mind because like again, like I've purchased the three original Ghostbusters, and the only kid I want is Egon's granddaughter, and
Yeah.
she's nowhere. So I'm trying to figure out like, is she coming out in some sort of special 2-pack, or am I finally gonna get my scale Ecto 1 that can fit the figures in it? Probably not, because I already have an Ecto 1 for this line. But where is she, and why can't I buy her yet?
I don't know why.
Yeah. Mhm.
Phoebe Spangler.
Yeah, Phoebe. Yeah, like Phoebe is missing, and it's annoying. But it's like, yeah. Oh well. I digress.
Well, the whole point, though, I mean, if you watch the trailer, you'll be able to get this pretty quick. Is that Egon clearly left New York for a reason?
Yep.
There's ties to Gozer and the Gozer worshippers, Cult of
Mm-hmm.
Gozer. They're clearly there in Oklahoma doing something weird.
Yep.
He, very much like Ivo Shandor in the first movie, he dies before his purpose is realized, so he leaves behind all of these clues and things for people to find. So the kids obviously find the tech, they find what he was working on, and at some point we're going to understand exactly what's going on here. But yeah, I mean, that pretty much brings us to the doorstep of this movie.
Afterlife. Yep.
Yeah, without filling in too much other stuff that's just wild speculation. But yeah, there's some good bones that are going into it.
Yep. Very excited for in this movie that the Ecto 1 is finally probably going to be running through the whole thing behind the scenes, because it turns out the way to solve the problem with the car breaking down constantly, just put a Corvette engine in it and it'll run fine, because that's what they did.
If it worked for every like mid-50s Chevy, it should work for that thing, right?
Absolutely does. And like, if you're wondering like how they get that massive wagon to drift, about 450 horsepower is how they did that.
Well, hopefully, folks, this was the little bit of adrenaline you needed for your Ghostbusters knowledge. We did not want to give the entire thing away, but we did want to help, bridge some of the information that we hope will be useful on the way there.
Absolutely. And final thoughts before we leave you, Mark. Trying to imagine early 20th century, Ivo Shandor's going around. He's building all of his buildings, right? He's got some wealth, but no one has that much wealth where they can, do that to New York City on their own. So he's going to all these other very affluent, very wealthy people in New York to get them in. And he's not going to lead with the Gozer stuff. You don't go straight to the crazy cult to get wealthy people on your side. How did you get him there? My money is on Eyes Wide Shut parties.
I wish it were that simple. But what he actually promises them is a place in the afterlife. That's how he did it. He went to all these major business leaders around New York, and he said, this will be your place in the new world when Gozer comes in.
And they bought that. Hook, line, and sinker.
They bought it hook, line, and sinker, but at the same time, what also happened was this transformation of these people upon death. So that's one thing we didn't actually go into a ton here, was that the massive amount of negative energy that Vigo creates, Ivo Shandor also creates that same amount of negative energy just in the things that he does and what he has, performed in his life. So upon death, he has the ability to turn into the architect form, which is this massive, like Roman statue dude hurling fireballs. Well, the same thing happens to these business leaders of New York. You saw the chairman in the video game. So the chairman is the guy, the head of National Steel that you talk about. He, in the afterlife, ends up having all these crazy powers. He can manipulate how big he is, all this kind of stuff. So that's what he sold them on, was that when you die, based on the knowledge I have of, Gozer worshiping and this stuff, you'll have a front seat to the show.
Oh, wow. And here to think, I was just here thinking like, hey, they could have got me with kinky sex. And that's all they needed.
I know.
Good on them. Way to hold out for power, guys. Good for you.
If you give me a bag of chips, I'd probably be okay with it.
Yeah, I've been fine. Yep.
Yeah. I'd be a cool customer either way.
Yeah, but they're like, we're all off to see the Wizard of Goz. Why? Because of the terrible things that he does.
So, Joe, do you think it's time for us to try to get Ghostbusters 101 into colleges nationwide?
I think so. I think we're ready to become professors that get thrown off of campuses ourselves.
Yes, I think we can do it. We've got the energy.
I'm ready to be told that I treat education and science as a hustle.
The part we're meant to play.
Yeah.
Oh, but hey, folks, we really do hope that we gave you an awesome crash course going into Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is going to be coming out in November 19th. It's been delayed a couple times.
Months. Yeah.
Yeah. But 2 short months. We're looking forward to it. But similar to the past few weeks, as our epic conclusion here, we're going to do is a few more shout outs to our friends in the Twitterverse.
Yeah.
Specifically, we want to talk.
Yeah.
We want to talk about some folks that are good friends of ours, as well as some that we've reviewed recently. We do help review other podcasts, especially when folks are kind of up and coming like we've been. And one of these shows that sent us an episode in was the Midnight Train podcast. If you guys haven't listened to them before, they're actually, it's a really cool concept. So it's a group of friends that are sharing some stories with each other. A lot of times they end up being, if you want to call it's not quite true crime, but if you've ever looked at some of the like bizarre and unsolved cases, over the last 150 years, 200 years, these guys will bring their panel in. They'll talk about these topics, and it's an interesting balance because some of the stories are creepy, but these guys are really funny. So they managed to balance it extremely well. So the Midnight Train podcast, folks, highly recommend that you check it out. We'll link them here in the notes as well.
Yeah. Alongside the Midnight Train podcast, another good friend of the podcast is Torch the Poet. And he's taking Twitter by storm right now with lots of fun debates that he has on his show, as well as other topics that he talks about. Recently, he did an open debate on the age-old comparison of Star Wars and Star Trek. And if that man was willing to take that on willingly, openly, all over the internet, kudos to you, friend. And if you're on Twitter, he does host weekly discussions via Twitter Spaces, which basically are like an audio chat room that he gets to host daily. So check him out.
Yeah, seriously, Torch, we appreciate your support. And speaking of support that we appreciate, we'd also like to call out our friend Jeff, the podcast father, or otherwise known as the indie podcaster.
Papa Day Podcast.
If you remember, we actually shared some posts about our interview with Podcast Father. This would have been, I think we recorded it back in July, and then I think it launched in August. So if you haven't heard that yet, though, definitely pay our friend Jeff over at the Podcast Father a visit. We'll link that in the notes as well. And actually, it was right when we introduced Chelsea to the program.
Yeah.
So kind of on that kicking off point. Nice little time capsule for those of you that have been listening to us since day one.
Yep. In that time capsule, you'll find an ocarina and the episode of the Podcast Father with us and Chelsea for the first time.
I was hoping you were going to say garlic bread in some capacity there.
Well, always garlic bread. That's just assumed at this point.
Well, as we've mentioned before, we do want to leave some actual stuff for you to find out there on future episodes. We do have a very big episode coming up next week, so we do want to actually share that with you.
Yes.
If you followed our social media, you've seen a post that we've sat down with the legendary voice actor Kyle Hebert, and I mean he's pretty much voiced every damn Japanese voiceover that's come over to the United States.
He really has. Like, if you take the plethora of anime and you just throw a stick at that list, you're gonna hit 5 things that he's been in. And it's randomly, that pool is huge. You just throw it and boom, 5 Kyle Hebert voices right there.
I mean, right off the top of my head, we've got Dragon Ball Z, we've got JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. He's Ryu in Street Fighter.
My Hero Academia. He's
One Piece.
One Piece.
God, I mean, he is. For one, he was brilliant to get done to talk to you. Hilarious guy. And so we can't wait to show you that one next week after this. But we thought we won't tease it anymore. I mean, there's photos of it out there. We've been advertising it now for a couple weeks, so it's officially coming, guys. we talk to Kylie Bear in just a week's time. But yeah, otherwise though, I think, Joe, we're good for the part of the podcast where we say keep on dissecting.
Yeah, I think we're at that point. So if you haven't picked up on it yet and you're not quite sure what to do, I'm going to say while you're out there, you just keep on dissecting.